Gwathrenost Tier 3 has a super high DPS check that requires all members in the raid to follow all mechanics and do absolutely everything possible to maximize the damage done by the DPS team. Each boss fight takes coordination, but once you understand the mechanics, you will understand positioning and how to defeat each boss. Today I'll show you all my tips and tricks for clearing Gwathrenost on T3. I encourage you to watch the entire video to learn how you can master Gwath T3 and get your friends geared out. To succeed in T3, you must be willing to die a lot, over and over and over, as everyone in your team learns the mechanics, positioning, and timing of what is required of them. Second, you need to put in time to practice this fight. It will take you many hours to learn the fight on T3. Third, persistence and perseverance is key. Getting up every time you fall down and having another go at it, trying to improve with every iteration. Everything here can also help you with T2 if you are stuck. The fights are only slightly different between T2 and T3, but we employ the same strategies. Use the chapters below to jump to any specific fight that you need help with. You want to take the following classes to the raid for T3. 2 tanks, because you'll need to trade off boss debuffs. Any combination of the Guardian, Brawler, Captain, or Warden is viable for Gwathrenost, which is great because we always need more tanks. Blue Runekeeper does massive single target heals and is great to focus on the tank that is holding the boss, while the Bear focuses on the off-tank and tank group, and Minstrel focuses on the DPS group. Champs are an absolute must in this fight, because of the debuff on mobs that take more melee damage. Red Captains play a big role in pure line DPS to help maximize the DPS team's damage. There are several trash mobs that you will encounter outside of Carn-Dûm, leading to the tower entrance, where you will be faced with your first boss Gurkrak. I will only be covering the mobs that are of interest or that you will also encounter in the boss fights and will need to know how to deal with them. The Citadel guards have corruptions on them that allow them to take less incoming damage and at the same time do more damage. Keep removing corruptions if you want to burn the guards down quickly. On T3, the Curse Shouters become a real problem because they do a yellow bar induction that heals up the mobs. To get through these fights in the speediest manner, Curse Shouters need to be high up on the kill list. The fighters have a reflective damage corruption on them. Thus, your DPS team can reflect themselves to death. Your options for managing the fighters are first, have the off-tank pull them out of group, or second, CC them, but in my experience the best option is number 3, where the Berg twists them and kill these targets first. Each mob group will have 2 fighters. Once the fighters are down, the champs can go to town, and all DPS can AoE everything else down quick. This is the quickest strategy. That does, however, mean that the CC needs to babysit the Curse Shouters for interrupts so that they don't get heals off. There will be an Overseer in the last mob pull before the boss. The Overseer has a buff that is called Arm of the Iron Crown. The Overseer will buff the entire mob, allowing the mob to do 50% more outgoing damage and decrease the mob's incoming damage by 50%. Thus, if you see an Overseer, kill it first. Thus, the ideal and optimized kill order for the exterior mobs are Overseer first because of the buff, Fighters next because of Reflect. Once fighters are down, everyone can AoE. Curse Shouters third because of heals, and Citadel Guard last because of damage. After that, clean up any of the remaining trash. For each boss fight, I have created these strategy sheets that are linked in the description below. You're welcome to share the strat sheets with your friends and help get everyone on the same page as to what needs to be done. Gurkrak has several mechanics that all need to be accounted for. At 75, 50, and 25%, he will summon Menders. The Menders have a yellow bar induction that must be interrupted. While the induction is going off, the Menders heal the boss. On Tier 2, the enrage timer is 9 minutes, and on T3, the enrage timer is 8 minutes. If you're going to defeat an enrage timer, you must be sure to interrupt and kill these Menders quick. We typically assign the Berg, LM, Redcap, and Hunter TA a member to interrupt before it is killed. While the menders are up, the boss takes relatively little damage, so you must destroy the menders. During thundering blows, debris will rain down from the sky. 4 random people will be marked by Gurkrak as the lucky players. These players need to get away from the group so as to not drop debris on top of everyone. Debris can kill. You will see a red circle and a square on the ground. You just need to be outside of the square to not get any debris on you. Gurkrak does not take any damage during thundering blows. He stands in place, throwing a tantrum, and everyone should avoid him during this phase so as to not take any of his AoE damage. Once thundering blows is up, everyone should group up right behind the boss to manage the distributed damage and save your tank. If your tanks keep dying, even if they are maxed on mitigations and vitality, this is because of distributed damage. While Gurkrak takes damage, the entire raid needs to be on his butt to avoid the tanks taking all the damage and going down from a 4 million morale hit. Right after thundering blows, Gurkrak does a poison dot called Acrid Belch that reduces a player's morale by 30% if it is not cleansed. Every player is responsible for removing their own poison. Right after thundering blows, Gurkrak also does a fear dot called Growing Terror. If this fear goes off, then it will do 130k damage every 3 seconds for 9 seconds. But it will also cause the marked raider to run away, taking away precious DPS time. For this reason, it is important to have a Berg along that can do a raid-wide cleanse to remove that fear. Also, people should bring pots, just in case. Hemorrhage is the name of the frontal debuff that Gurkrak applies to anyone standing in front of him. Hemorrhage will rank up and does more damage the higher it goes. This is why you need to have 2 tanks that can swap tanking the boss. If you are not actively tanking the boss, you need to take up position behind the boss, or you will continue to take this hemorrhage damage. Congrats! You looted. You're done with boss 1. Now remember to go through the portal or you won't get locks to boss 2. I know it's stupid, but that's the way it works. The first set of mobs right inside the door are identical to what was outside, so I'm not going to rehash those. But once the interior door opens, you now have to deal with the Iron Crown. On T3, the Sentinels have a kill shot, just like the Black Arrows in Hidden Horde. So you either have to CC the Sentinels or deal with them first. They will make a reappearance in the third boss fight. Usually there are 2 Sentinels per pull. Berg will take care of one and the Alum will take care of the other. On the first couple of pulls though, the DPS will just kill them, but later on there are higher priority targets. If you're getting overrun with ghosties, this is because the priests or priestesses aren't dying fast enough or not being interrupted. If the tank groups up everything, then melee class will mow these down before they cause too much trouble. The priests also make it harder to kill the mobs, so typically melee will go after them. They have a buff called Bulwark of the Iron Crown that reduces mobs' incoming damage by 34%, while their Furious Inspiration makes the mobs do 20% more damage. In the last pull before the next boss room, you will encounter your first sorcerer. The Sorc has an aura called Unbreakable Focus. Any mob in its vicinity cannot be interrupted. You will either need to kill the sorcerer first or pull him out of group. When a mob gets the corruption Oathbound, they cannot be defeated until the corruption is removed. Everyone in your raid needs to get comfortable with removing corruptions the moment they see them. All classes have corruption removal skills, so if someone calls for corruption, hit that skill. The mobs will actually do 1.3 times more damage while they are in this state. They will sit there at 1% health until the corruption is removed and they are dealt a killing blow. The 3 mobs that must be dealt with one way or another are the Sorc, Sentinels, and Priests. Group strategies on this may vary. One example. Off-tank pulls Sorc out of group and down the stairs. Berg and Alum mez and interrupt the Sentinels, while damage takes care of single targets like the Priests. Although this is probably the safest way to do this, it is also the slowest. but if your group is just learning this fight, this may be what you want to do. What we usually do is the range will focus on killing the Sorks, while melee goes in and blenders everything up on sentinels first, then priests. Usually by the time range has Sork down, the champs have mowed down the rest of the ads. The Castellan Obashurz awaits us in the next room. In my opinion, this is probably the hardest fight in this entire raid, simply because there is a lot going on and a very specific strategy that we use. A link to the strategy guide is in the description below, if you'd like to share it with your kin. Let's start with the arena. We enter from the west, and in front of us is the Castellan in the middle of a raised platform. There are 4 pillars around the room, and 4 total doors. The enrage timer on T2 is 9 minutes, and on Tier 3 is 8 minutes. So it is very tight. To optimize the amount of damage your DPS team does, they need to not be running all over the place. For that reason, you should decide what side of the room will be the killing side. We typically use the north end for this, but it could be the south as well. Now, let's take a look at the phases. The reason you must split the Castellan from the attendants is because of this Castellan's edict, where he buffs the attendants to do 50% more damage, while the attendants' incoming damage is reduced by 25%. With a short enrage timer, it is an absolute must that the Castellan be split from the attendants to kill them quickly. Oathsworn attendants will spawn at 90, 65, and 40%, while lights will spawn at 75, 50, and 25%. At 20%, there is a Hope Wipe and Fury. Let's look at each phase. First, attendants. You will have 2 tanks here. One tank will be the boss tank that will drag the Castellan to the south side while the attendants are up. This tank should taunt the Castellan at 93, 68, and 43%, so 3% before it phases, to give themselves enough time to run to the south with the Castellan and be away from the ad tank's AoE. As soon as the attendants spawn, everyone should move to the center of the room to pull all the attendants together. If you have a guard, they should do War Chant. Then the LM needs to Bane Flare, and the guard will challenge and pull the ads to the north. Once Bane Flare wears off, the Berg should twist to keep the attendants down longer. The reason for this is 1, this ensures that the tank has enough aggro to copy and the attendants don't go roaming all over the place, and 2, the attendants do a ton of damage, so the longer they are incapacitated, the stabler the fight will be. The attendants have a debuff called Brittle Armor, which means they take 25% more incoming melee damage. This is an absolute must to bring at least 1 champ to this fight. This will make the fight go by so much faster. Once the attendant dies, it drops a green puddle, and everything standing inside that puddle will take damage, including the Castellan. So once the attendants are dead, you want to pull the Castellan into the green puddle and pound away at it. At 75, 50, and 25%, the lights will spawn at the yellow dots. There will be a total of 4 lights, and where they spawn will be completely random. The nearest lights will be from the east and west. Our standard order is to do east, west, north, south. If you have 2 in one direction, send your AoE melee to take care of it. You should designate someone in your group that is going to be responsible for calling this, so everyone knows where to run. You only have so much time before they reach the Castellan. Once the lights reach the Castellan, they heal the Castellan up by 5% and turn into attendants. It is pretty impossible to beat T3 when this happens. In the event that you get an attendant, you will need to be split from the boss. Don't waste your time here killing the attendant, because this is the prime time you need to focus on the Castellan. Leave this attendant for the next wave of ads. Once you have this dance figured out between the attendant spawning and lights, you need to do 2 more times and then you loot. The boss does a grey bar induction called Fear of the Dark. If ignored, the fear can kill, especially after enrage timer hits. You want to get into the shadow of one of the 4 pillars around the room, and make sure that you have the shadow tooltip on your bar. Yes, you'll take some damage, but the healers can heal through that. Ideally, you want the tank to position the boss close to the pillar so that melee DPS can stand in the shadow while still being able to deal damage to the Castellan. However, it is super important that the second the induction bar is gone, the tank turns the Castellan away from the group, or the Castellan will frontal and kill the group. The timing here is important for a tank to learn. Fear happens repeatedly throughout the fight, so unless you're running Prime that will track for you, this induction is something the tank with the boss targeted will need to call to the entire group. As if that wasn't enough, there is also the purple eye mechanic. How this works is that the Castellan will fling you across the room to him and put a purple eye over your head, signifying that you've been marked with coalescing shadows that deals 20% of max morale every 2 seconds. Players must run out of group to drop this, preferably by the east and west gates. One player can survive this, but if 2 players are next to each other with the eye, both of them will die once the puddle drops. Thus, if you get the purple eye and you are rooted by the boss, you must tell people to get away from you, or you will likely kill them. This is why it's important to designate where the eyes need to be dropped. Only exception is if the tank gets the purple eye, they still need to tank in their designated spot, but they need to call it to the melee classes to know to get away. At 20%, the Castellan will do a hope wipe. It falls to the healers to pop hope tokens. Once the Castellan gets enraged, he will have a buff called Fury of the Castellan that allows him to do 20% more damage and increased run speed by 10%. Tanks must save their big protective skills starting 1 minute before enrage, and get ready for this. Healers also need to start saving their big heals and bubbles. Fates Entwined, DNF, be on the tanks by now, and so forth. Tanks can get one-shotted. If this happens, all chaos breaks out, so keep your head. Whoever has the boss's aggro needs to run and kite, unless you're the tank that can take it. If you find yourself in a situation where the ads are being managed, no one is dying, and you're still hitting the enraged timer and dying, this means your DPS is too slow. Note, however, that DPS is not only the responsibility of the damaging class, but also support. We run a red cappy for this purpose to help supplement damage. Berg needs to place enrages on TA targets. Bear should use bees in armor crush. Even the minstrel could go red to have better damage balance. Whatever needs to do to get those attendants in light down will help you get over the hump of this fight. Right, you've looted, but wait, more ads. You will see more of the Iron Crown here, but there is one new ad here called Oathsworn. The Oathsworn have an aura called Bulwark of the Iron Crown, which reduces the incoming damage to all mobs around it. When there is only one Oathsworn in the group, you must kill it first. But when there are 2 Oathsworn, or say an Oathsworn and Sork in group, you need to pull out the extra Oathsworn and Sork, and only focus on one target. Keep the kill target in the group so that you can continue utilizing your AoE damage. Otherwise, it takes forever to get through these mobs. This is also excellent practice for the next boss fight, so your tanks need to get comfortable managing the presence of Oathsworn and Sorks. You've made it to the last boss room. The final 2 boss fights will take place in this arena, so finally no more trash mobs to clear to get here. Let's take a moment to appreciate the room. You may actually recognize this throne room. It is not the first time we've been in this room. This room is actually the same throne room of the earlier Karn Doom content in the Epic quest line. However, you may notice that there is a monument in the middle of the room before the throne that is placed there as a marker. We'll get to its significance later. To start, everyone will need to be up on the stairs, because the lava marks the edges of the boss's arena. Obviously, if you step into the lava during the fight, you die. There are 2 main phases to this fight. During phase 1, you will only fight Glaghord. Glaghord initially has a corruption on him called Wild Might. Do not remove this corruption. Yes, he deals 10% more damage when he has this corruption on, but he also takes 15% more melee damage Thus, you need for a red captain and champ in your raid. Your group needs to practice to not remove this corruption. Every 18 seconds, the boss will rank up its debuff on the tank. Tanks need to trade the boss at the end of rank 2, but before rank 3. Even with maximum mitigations, rank 3 can one-shot the tank. Then things become unstable, and it's a losing race. Note, anyone standing in front of Glaghord will get this debuff. Thus, the tank needs to position the boss with its back towards the raid. On T3, Glaghord will drop a yellow puddle and he'll get shields spinning around him. You want to move Glaghord and the mobs out of this puddle so that they are easier to kill. Bellowing Shout is a yellow bar induction that needs to be interrupted. It is a frontal damage. Executioner's Strike is a one-shot frontal on T3. Tanks must move behind Glaghord when he does this grey bar induction, because it cannot be interrupted, but it can be avoided by moving away. Glaghord will spawn ads at 90 and 70%, and green bars at 40%. Our general strategy is to kill left side and mez right side. We drag Glaghord to the ads so that Glaghord continues to take AoE damage while the ads are killed. At 90%, the ads that spawn are 2 Death Callers and 4 Hunters, evenly divided between left and right sides. Kill order will be Death Callers first because they heal the other mobs. Death Caller does a yellow bar induction called Blood Gift that must be interrupted as it heals up the mobs, including the boss. The TA typically gets the left Death Caller, while Red Captain focuses on interrupting the right Death Caller. Of special note, ads will not die if they have corruption on them. Everyone needs to remember to remove corruptions. At 70%, there will be a total of 2 Oathsworn, 2 Venom Masters, 2 Death Callers, and 4 Hunters. Kill order will be Oathsworn, Hunters, Death Callers, and Venom Masters. Venom Masters will siphon morale from a person and then transfer that morale to the mob. It's a bolt with a white light shooting from their fingers. It needs to be interrupted. Whichever tank does not have the boss and the ads will pick up the Oathsworn from the right and drag it to the right side of the throne, away from the group. Once the left Oathsworn is dead, the off tank will drag the right Oathsworn back to the group and DPS will AoE off it. The hunters do not move once they enter the arena, so to optimize kill time, the tanks need to drag all the mobs onto the left hunter first. Then once the hunters go down, the tank will drag all the mobs to the right hunters. The enrage timer does not start till you get to the second phase, so technically you can allow the Death Callers to get heals off, but it means more instability in the fight. At 40%, Glaghord will green bar and Asachal will come a fourth. The enrage timer will start as soon as Asachal becomes active. On T3, the enrage timer is 11 minutes. Asachal will put a protective shield around her and Glaghord if they stay grouped up together. The 2 tanks need to separate them. You should kill Glaghord first because his health is already the lowest. Glaghord will maintain all his previous mechanics, but he will not summon any more ads. On T3, it may be necessary for the tanks to swap aggro, because tanks can get one-shotted if they rank up to 3. Once Glaghord is down, it is time to face Asachal. At 75, 50, and 25%, Asachal will run to the bottom of the throne and fling everyone across the room towards her. Now, if you're standing between the stairs and the marker in the middle of the room, it is highly unlikely that you'll get tossed into the fire. We typically all group up on top of the marker at this point and wait for a second. Right after the pull, Asachal is going to slow down the entire raid and a couple of seconds later drop firebombs on each player. Group must spread out during this stage so as not to drop fire on top of each other, which can be deadly. After fire puddle drops, step out of the puddle and carry on with the battle. Whoever is actively tanking Asachal is responsible for calling the pull so the raid can get into position. Asachal will randomly select 4 people to place Blood Boil on, including the tanks. Best practice is to make sure to draw blood boil out of the group. People need to stay out of the blood boil puddles, or their morale will take large chunks of damage. Asachal will say, "May your blood boil." This is when you need to run out of group if you are the marked victim. Asachal's debuff will rank up on whoever is actively tanking her. Note that Asachal does not do any frontal damage, so you can drag her anywhere you want to make sure she's taking AoE damage with the other mobs. Tanks need to swap aggro on Asachal at the end of rank 2, but before rank 3 is reached. Whoever is tanking Asachal is responsible for interrupting her yellow bar inductions. The first yellow bar induction is called kneeling. If this goes off, everyone in the raid will take the knee, disrupting all inductions and causing chaos while the mobs pound on you. Horrify is a second yellow bar induction, where Asachal will fear everyone and cause them to leap off the edge into the lava and melt to death. Typically happens right after the third ad wave, but can happen at other times as well. Because of the complexity of this fight, it is super important for the tanks to discuss in advance who will be tanking the ads and who will be tanking Asachal, and tanks must be ready at all times to interrupt or call for help if their interrupt isn't available. Asachal will summon ads at 80, 60, and 40%, and they get progressively deadlier as the fight goes on. At 80%, there will be 2 priests, 4 soldiers, 4 sentinels. We kill the left sentinels first, while Alim and Berg messes the right sentinels. Sentinels must die first because on T3 they will do kill shots. After all the sentinels go down, you will need to take out the priests because of their buff, Furious Inspiration, that allows them to do the most damage. Since they're dealing the most damage, you want to take them out next. After that, it is just trash cleanup. Make sure to continuously remove corruptions or the mobs won't die. At 60%, there will be 4 priests, 4 soldiers, 4 sentinels, and 2 sorks. Note that on T3, in this boss fight, the sorks will have a reflect damage corruption up, as well as its other abilities that prevent other mobs from being interrupted and reducing incoming damage. Strategy here is for the tank who is not tanking the ads to pull both sorks out of group until DPS is ready for them. Note the tanks will continue to swap Asachal between them while ads are up. The sork tank must focus on removing all the corruptions from the sorks. Kill order will be sentinels on the left, then sentinels on the right, then the priests. After the priests go down, ad tank will pull one of the sorks into the group. Blow up the sork, then pull in the other sork and kill it. Continue to remove corruption from sorks to ensure that no one gets reflected to death. By the time the 2 sorks go down, the rest of the mob will have died due to AoE. At 40%, 4 drakes that spawn from the 4 corners of the arena. The drakes do a wing buffet, yellow bar induction that will fling the raid through the air and knock people into the lava. Thus, they must be interrupted. We typically assign support the role of interrupting the drakes. That is, TA, Redcap, Berg, and LM each take one. These assignments should be made before the boss is activated. Positioning here is also super important because the drakes do a ton of frontal damage. For everyone's safety, it is recommended for the entire raid to group up by the stairs where we entered the arena. Tanks will stand by the marker. Tanks will need to stay focused on Asachal because we can't allow the interrupts to go off on her because they are instant kills. Save all big hits for drakes because you want to do maximum damage to allow the tanks to be able to copy that threat and hold the aggro. Typically how this looks with the guard, the drake spawn, the guard will war chant and use Thrill of Danger to draw the ads in, the Berg will twist and remove all corruptions, the ads do not take damage until corruptions are removed. The DPS will run in and do massive damage off the TA, the guard will challenge. Note there may be a second or two where DPS will have aggro, but it won't be long. Guard will challenge and hold it. Alternatively, if your DPS does not have high enough mitigations, the off tank will AoE taunt first, then the guard will challenge, popping the threat from the other tank. After this, everything should be locked down on the guard, and the DPS team can just go to town. Kill all the drakes. Then it is smooth sailing and killing Asachal, unless she enrages. In the event that Asachal enrages, DNF will need to be on tanks before enrage hits. Tanks will do all they can, saving all their big survival skills to survive the additional damage that Asachal will deal. During this phase, all healers must target the tank, who is on the boss. If both tanks go down here, it is a wipe. Time to loot! Also, don't click the green shard in the middle of the room where the marker was. It starts the next boss. For the last boss, the shard, you will notice that the entire room is now available, meaning that you can cross the bridge to the south during the fight and be by the doors that you came in. There is a soft enrage on this boss, in that at 85%, the shard starts Rain of Sprinters. This is a damage debuff that will continue to tier up as the fight goes on and cannot be removed. Thus, if it tiers up too high, and your healers and tanks can keep up with it, then it will be a wipe. This enrage is heavily dependent on the survivability of your group. To extend the soft enrage, at 86%, key classes like the Champ, Berg, LM, Mini, Captain, and Warden should apply all their damage reduction debuffs on the boss so that the initial hit can be reduced. For the first 45% of the shard's health, you'll be on the north side where the shard spawns. When the boss activates, he will do a massive frontal to whoever is standing nearest it. This means that only tanks should be by the shard, and everyone else should be by the stairs. Once the boss is aggroed, the entire group needs to move up and be on the shard's butt to help with distributed damage. If you get an eye on you, you need to step out of group, drop the puddle, and step back into the group. Do not drop puddles on the group because they deal a lot of damage. Starting at 90%, the shard also drops a puddle that you must stay out of. The shard's puddle can kill in a couple of seconds of exposure. At 60% of the shard's health, one of the tanks should run to the south, cross the bridge. We'll call this Tank 1. Tank 1 needs to taunt the shard at 55% and pull the shard to the south. The rest of the DPS will follow and group up on the carpet behind the shard. This is the preparation for the Druzok ads that spawn at 50%. Tank 1 will need to focus on puddle management. You will want to slow kite the shard in the southwest corner, keeping out of the puddles while leaving room for the melee classes to get close enough to deal damage without being frontaled. This takes some practice, and your tank may need several pulls to get comfortable with positioning the shard for maximum damage. Everyone should stay grouped up as much as possible on the shard to help take the distributed damage. When the Druzok spawns, Tank 2 needs to pick up the Druzok and make sure that they have complete aggro on these mobs. DPS should continue to kill shard until Tank 2 is ready. By the time aggro is secured, it will be time to swap the shard. Tank 2 with the Druzok runs to Tank 1 with the shard, and they trade. Tank 2 pulls the shard to the east, away from the raid. Raid opens up AoE and kills the Druzok quick. Benefit of tanking the Druzok in the southwest corner is that you can ignore their wing buffet. Because they are locked onto the Tank 1, they'll just be knocking the tank back into the wall. At 40%, the shard will start to root and punt players, so be sure to not get punted into the lava. Once all the Druzok are dead, everyone should go back onto the shard. Burn the shard down to 25%. By that point, the floor on the southeast side will be full of puddles. Have Tank 1 pull the shard to the southwest. Once shard is in position, the entire raid will move to the door. Tank 2 will run towards the north and pick up Asachal and Glaghord that have come back to life. Tank 2 will keep Asachal, while the other tank keeps shard and Glaghord. Note that depending on the debuff ranks, tanks may need to swap targets back and forth. While Asachal and Glaghord are alive, all their skills will be active, except they won't summon ads. Asachal and Glaghord will need to be separated because Asachal will put a protective barrier around them, both if they are too close together, meaning they'll take little to no damage. The key to success here is to kill Asachal as quickly as possible. This is a good time to do Oathies on Asachal. Remember to drop blood boils and eyes out of group. Asachal will do a pull and fire a puddle every 70 seconds. The longer it takes to get her down, the higher the chance of a wipe. To avoid the wipe, the tank needs to position Asachal by the north side of the bridge, while everyone stays grouped up on the south side of the bridge. Make sure players group up close to the bridge, so that if Asachal gets her second pull off, people don't fly into lava. Once Asachal is down, Minstrel should do CTG, and Cappy should Oathies Glaghord, kill Glaghord quick. When someone is sharded, their skills become inactive. Need to remove the wound in order to get out of it. On T3 it can stack up to 3, so you may need to use your personal cleanse, a pot, and have a healer or berg cleanse for it to be gone. You may hear people call sharded, indicating that they are unable to perform their duties. If you can get past Asachal, then this is the easiest boss fight. But because so few groups get practice on this last boss, it tends to be the highest barrier to overcome. The shard will place a debuff on the tanks that will also cheer up if the tanks don't swap. This makes managing the ads challenging. You'll need to be able to swap at rank 2 if you're just learning this. You could try and push rank 3 and higher, but once a tank goes down, it is really hard to recover. You'll need to test this out by trial and error. Subscribe to this channel for more tips, tricks, and strategies on LOTRO raids. Thanks for watching.